operations over here. The issue from our perspective is whether there's a valid land use permit in place. It used to be that the permit rolled forward in some fashion. I have a copy of something which was not executed. It may have been the latest version. It would have been effective through November 2011. I don't know if this was ever executed, in fact. So we would have the job of developing a better land use permit, and it's not our problem. Who really is the garden club? They'll have to sort that out internally in some fashion. Whoever it is will have to be the garden club, demonstrated by having a majority of the members holding plots through their bylaws, come forward and say, this is the garden club, these are our leaders, they can sign for us.
But isn't it our rule, though, to equity? There was yesterday they did bring up whether or not, and this hasn't anything to do with whether or not the voting was legal or not legal, but as far as we're concerned, it's equity. And one of the problems that was mentioned was that, let's see, what do they call it? The people with the vote, and what would the people call without the vote?
They're a member.
Members versus
Associates.
And the associates problem is that they're always associates. They're never given the opportunity to become members.
That's not true, actually.
Well, anyway, this is basically what they're saying is that how long can someone hire associates or have associates managing a garden if they're not doing it themselves?
Well, the issue is that the associates many of the associates want their own plot, but there's not a plot available because there's waiting for turnover, and there's a waiting list. Now, supposedly there's somebody who monitors the waiting list and it's done in an equitable manner, but a lot of people hang on to their plots a long time. So they can recruit an associate to help them out in their garden. There is dues for the associate, which is lower than the due for the member. And they can work together, so the associate sort of has the opportunity of working in the plot without them really being the quote-unquote owner of the plot. I mean, it's really like a rental, and you bring in a roommate.
I'm thinking more like River Cross. I remember when we had a problem, or we still have a problem, when people come in and they rent their apartments. And the whole rule is that they need to be in that apartment and not subleasing it all the time. And that's the feeling I'm getting now with the gardening, is that members are basically holding on to their membership, but they really are not gardening that area themselves.
I don't think that's necessarily it's variable from member to member. In other words, some people just like the extra help and they like sharing it with somebody else. Some people, the associates, it's very variable from gardener to gardener and associate to associate.
Well, I can definitely understand, though, how an associate can view this as not being fair if they've been waiting a long time. And if there's a waiting list, of course, it's wonderful that there's a waiting list. But it's our due diligence to make sure that things are done fairly.
The beef seems to be, if I'm understanding, or this is my interpretation of what you're saying, make sure I'm getting it right, that there are people who are the owners of the plots by their definition, members, that are not actually gardening. Their plots are being operated by associates. That being the case, if the member isn't actively gardening the plot, then perhaps that plot should go to the next person on the waiting list.
Yes.
Did I get that right?
Yes, you have it absolutely right.
But
And
the
you thought I was the only one who cared about this
intention,
stuff.
though, when you have associates, is not to give up your gardening to let somebody else do it for you. The idea is that you work together. That was the intent.
But is that happening?
It's the degree of surveillance. This is a club. And, I was on the, Howard and I are both members of the garden club. We both have plots next to each other.
We got a plot last year. I was on the
Then I
waiting
guess
list
you
6
should
years.
excuse yourself.
Huh?
In that case, you should excuse yourself.
Oh, we will for any decisions.
You're card carrying members.
In that case,
You're not sharecroppers.
No, but because we're on the inside, we see that there's variability in terms of how the associates operate.
Yes, but we cannot ignore we cannot ignore the, I guess you might say the problem that you might consider not a problem, but other people who are
Well-
involved see it as a
well, one
problem.
way-
We
one way
need
of
to
solving-
investigate this.
We do, but one way of solving the problem, I'll just suggest, is that no more associates.
Yeah.
And then if a person does not maintain their garden,
Mhm.
then the standards committee removes them.
I think that would eliminate the
that's a-
problem.
But
for now,
it's
it-
not our,
I don't know
But we
what the
do have a
current status-
problem with
I
the
am
residents.
shocked, I am shocked, I tell you, shocked to find that 2/3 of the real estate advisory committee have an interest in the property in the garden club.
I don't care, but I do care about the residents. But the residents care.
well, so,
You know,
that's-
I
so
don't really
when,
care.
when we,
From what I'm hearing for this is internal issues with the garden
It is
club,
an
for
internal
the
issue.
garden club to resolve.
but before we
Yes,
execute.
but we are responsible for equity.
But
And we
before-
have some residents who are diligently telling us that something is not fair. We need to think about this.
So before we execute a permanent extension, we would need to see some level of equity in their bylaws. So that would, so working out new terms for the lease extension in coupling with a surety that we're dealing with the correct club and the bylaws are appropriate and so on, that'll be part of our responsibility as a corporation. Kathy and I might recuse ourselves from
And
that, no problem.
after we pay proper attention and due diligence at this time, then we can feel comfortable signing the extension to the agreement and having them sign it, and then we can forget about it for another 10
Yes,
years.
I would love to.
Okay, so.
Can I ask a question on that?
No, it's not my.
Sure, why not?
Would it make a difference to the RIOC board if garden parts are being used by non-Roosevelt Island residents in
In
your?
fact, non-Roosevelt Island residents are permitted under the permit and under the bylaws to
We can
have
change
garden plots because they're available to anyone in the city of New York.
So would it make a so
That's the way it stands right now.
We can change that. That was a bad idea that was
I think so,
instigated during
too.
the previous gubernatorial administration, and we can change that anytime we want to, and we should.
I think we should too.
The list supposedly is very long to get a plot. That's what I've always
How
been
long
told.
were you on the list?
6 years.
Yeah, it's a long time.
You got a
You
plan
want
in
a
6 years?
non-resident to get
In
it.
only 6 years?
Yeah, you're lucky.
You're lucky.
Right. Sure that.
In
I
fact,
have
you.
no idea.
Took a look at
Well,
each
no,
of those.
it wasn't so clear cut as that. It's worse than that. I took over a plot. And then I cleaned it up and everything. And then the person wanted the plot back. I had to give it back.
Oh, well, somebody's
Don't
due your
tell the
plot.
IGA.
In that case, someone is due your plot.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that's- We're getting on a slippery slope.
Okay,
here.
Kathy and I have
Those
plots next to one
organizations.
another.
Oh, yeah.
But so we're gonna get, who's gonna go
Okay.
first?
We're getting on a very slippery slope to start looking into the
Especially the tape
organization.
recording.
Okay.
We could have the
Right.
same, make the same case for the Main Street Theater
I
or
agree.
the.
Right.
Well, to me, it's the same thing as the Main
Well,
Street
and,
Theater.
and the youth center
And
and everybody
you-
else, and
We can
if
consider-
we're gonna look at.
No, we're
look at everybody.
into equity.
So let's,
But, sorry,
I mean,
yeah, I
that's
don't
the
know
whole
that
big
it's,
thing,
it's,
equity.
let's move
unless
on.
they're breaking the law, I'm not sure it's
So
our
let's move on
business.
to
Then we
garden.
will
I have one
investigate.
more issue
I
for
don't
the,
think we should.
One more issue.
that came on to